Welcome to a journey through time, as we delve into the dark and haunting period of history known as the Transatlantic Slave Trade. The Transatlantic Slave Trade was the forced movement of millions of people from Africa to the Americas between the 16th and 19th centuries. It was one of the largest forced migrations in human history and had a profound impact on both Africa and the Americas. The transatlantic slave trade began in the 15th century, when Portuguese explorers arrived in Africa. The Portuguese were initially interested in trading goods with Africans, but they soon realized that there was a demand for slaves in the Americas. The Spanish, French, Dutch, and British soon followed the Portuguese into the slave trade, and by the 17th century, it was a thriving industry. The journey from Africa to the Americas, known as the Middle Passage, was a horrific ordeal. Slaves were packed into ships in cramped and unsanitary conditions. They were often chained together and given very little food or water. Many died during the voyage, and those who survived often arrived in the Americas sick and traumatized. Upon arrival in the Americas, enslaved Africans were sold at auctions like property, stripped of their dignity and freedom. Families were torn apart, cultures shattered, and generations were condemned to a lifetime of labor under brutal and degrading conditions. Once they arrived in the Americas, slaves were forced to work in a variety of industries, including agriculture, mining, and construction. They were often treated brutally, and many died from overwork, disease, or violence. Plantations became the epicenter of the slave trade's impact. Enslaved Africans were subjected to grueling labor, toiling in fields of sugar, cotton, and tobacco. Their back-breaking work laid the foundation for the economic prosperity of European colonizers, while slaves themselves suffered immeasurable pain. However, the story of the transatlantic slave trade is not one of resignation. Enslaved Africans fought back, challenging their captors at every turn. Through rebellions, revolts, and acts of resistance, they asserted their humanity and laid the groundwork for future liberation movements. In the late 18th century, voices of conscience emerged, demanding an end to this unspeakable cruelty. Abolitionists like Olaudah Equiano, Frederick Douglass, and William Wilberforce tirelessly campaigned for the abolition of slavery, igniting a global movement for freedom. Finally, in 1807, the British Parliament outlawed the transatlantic slave trade, followed by other nations in the years to come. Although it took decades for slavery itself to be abolished, this marked a turning point, signaling the beginning of the end of an era stained by human suffering. The transatlantic slave trade had a profound impact on both Africa and the Americas. In Africa, it led to the depopulation of many regions, and it disrupted traditional cultures and economies. In the Americas, it created a system of racial inequality that persists to this day. The slave trade also had a significant impact on the development of the Americas. Slave labor was essential to the construction of the economies of the Americas, and it helped to create the wealth and power of the European colonial powers. The transatlantic slave trade was a horrific and dehumanizing institution. It had a profound impact on both Africa and the Americas, and its legacy continues to be felt today. It is important to remember the slave trade so that we can work to overcome the legacy of racism and inequality that it created. What is your opinion about the transatlantic slave trade? Drop your comment in the comment section. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel.